In the ultimate display of selfishness, Edu Gaspar has decided to leave Arsenal Football Club to take the podcast attention off the Newcastle game. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. It doesn't get more Arsenal in your blood, in your veins, in your soul than that. When a man is willing to step down from his post simply so that one podcast episode is less focused on our worst performance of the season. That is dedication. It was indeed our worst performance of the season, and a loss that I think has some people scrambling for answers and scrambling for narrative. We will do our best to provide some answers, but also escape some narrative, I think, and criticize where criticism is warranted, provide perspective where perspective is potentially needed. We are going to start with the Edu conversation. What I will say is, if you prefer sort of the scathing emotional response to a bad loss that left a lot of questions for a lot of people, you've got the instant reaction. That one, I think, went more to the scathing direction. This one, we're going to try to sum things up, find some answers, figure out what happens next. It is, of course, a big week with Inter away and Chelsea away, so not a lot of time to lick our wounds. I don't think you're supposed to lick wounds, by the way. Like, I've had dogs, and every time they have like surgery or something, the thing they tell you is don't let it lick the wound. So in general, let's not lick our wounds. Apparently that's bad. It just opens the wound back up. Okay. So a little public service there. We will get some extra bonus content out for you in the next few days, obviously. So stand by for that. But we've got to do the main stuff here. So let's just dig into it without further ado. If anyone knows without further ado. Oh my God, I had my segue right there. And speaking of without further ado, there will be no further ado at Arsenal. Here to discuss that with me is Clive. You can find him on Twitter at ClivePFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
Oh my God, I got to change the title of the pod to without further ado. It's almost too clever not to do it. Pause on Twitter, pause my pants, I'll pause.
Woo! I got a doggy and I tried to persuade him to lick my wound once, and he looked at me and he says, "Are you nuts? That's like a wound. That's disgusting, dude."
It's funny. I always thought you might be the reason for our cancellation. I never thought it would be from the ASPCA, the Animal Protection Society. But there you go. It happened eventually. Okay. We're going to spend most of the time on the Newcastle game, the squad, the tactics, the issues, the footballing side of things, because that is top of mind right now. And there will be plenty of time with the interlull coming up. Thank God for one of those, by the way. I think to dig into more of the structural questions around the club in the wake of the Edu news. But let's just get into it. Clive, Edu Gaspar leaving for Nottingham Forest, a position where he will have more power at a multi-club model, and per the rumors being reported, treble his wages. For those people who live where I live, it's triple your wages. You say tomato, I say tomato. It's tomato, period. It's not tomato. So, Clive, what are your sort of immediate thoughts in the wake of this news?
Yeah, so as we record on this Monday morning for you, the rumor is that he's going to join a multi-club model and be the CEO. That role has recently been taken up at Arsenal by Richard Garlick, so you can do some maths there if you want to. I'm not prepared to at this moment in time until the story comes out. And Richard Garlick has underpinned himself with a new structure under himself. So potentially Edu's career path, he sees it going a different direction to what was on offer at Arsenal, which is more of a football technical director role. So that's just me guessing and adding up. You see, when you're tripling your salary and you have a broad sort of multi-region continental role in South America, in Europe, etc., then maybe that's how he wants to grow and develop himself. So that's just me guessing. From an Arsenal perspective, what do you do? So the first thing you do when something like this happens is you do an impact analysis and understand what that means for us. And then you look, just like we did with, say, Jonas left recently, we have like an interim person in charge. So when you lose somebody, you put an interim in and you make sure roles and responsibilities are divided around the club, so there's no void. There's no void in responsibilities, and people don't see it as a gap. We don't look vulnerable. And so that's what I'm looking at, really. So the first communication that comes out of the club will be around roles, responsibilities, and who's going to take that on to lessen the day-to-day impact immediately, so they can look forward to find out how they're going to restructure. And there is opportunity to restructure because Edu's role incorporated the academy, the women's side, and the men's side. So basically, he is Mr. Football. And so it gives an opportunity to maybe split some of that up a little bit, potentially, and form a new structure. But I will say, despite the fact that Mikel and Edu have been partners since day one, when Mikel came in, Mikel inherited Edu, per se, as part of the club, and therefore it's a fantastic relationship going forward. But there's an opportunity for Mikel to work with somebody of his own choice, shall we say. I do think the gravitas of that person is important, because what I don't want to go back to, Elliot, my good friend, is the days when I will be saying those magical words, single point of failure, with Arsene Wenger when we first started this, because he was everything to the club. And I personally don't want to go back to that, because it's just not sensible. It's not a sensible sort of diversified organizational structure. So I like to see something a little bit more defined. And so with Richard Garlick, with Tim Lewis, etc., that's not going to happen per se, because they're prominent figures. However, the football side of things, I think, needs another figure if Eddie was to go. So it'd be interesting to see which way they pivot to.
Yeah, well said. Paul, your thoughts?
So we've had him since 2019. He came in a different time for different people to do somewhat a different job. He grew into the job. So the question with Edu was, what was his superpower in terms of a guy within the club? I think his superpower in the end was he was good glue. He was good. He had a personality that managed us through different scenarios, ups and downs of the club. And was he a brilliant finder of talent, a brilliant coordinator of stats, scouting? I think he grew into it. I think he did a very passable job, but obviously this presents an opportunity for us. It's an opportunity we could fluff or make the most of. And so here we are, probably one of the most interesting clubs on the planet to work for. A fantastic job for somebody, a fantastic situation that's, as long as they're not thinking about this weekend, a super positive environment to move into. The other thing that Arsenal has going for it is we don't have a lot of Macbethian politics in here, right? There's a lot of clubs you could join who are in an interesting spot, an interesting job, etc. But like it's like watching Macbeth in terms of what goes on when you're in there. You're in there, you're out. They're turning you around. They're firing you. They're moving the people around you. The manager's gone. Like, this is a situation in which you can visualize yourself doing a really good job and being there for a long period of time with a stable organization that has a positive trajectory. It's a fantastic job to go and look for the best talent on the planet to do something like this. I'm minded that a few seasons ago, you will remember, Elliot, I was the one calling for Edu's head because things were going a little slowly in the transfer market that summer, and he was barbecuing and it was doing my head in. And normally I filter myself and I apply a little reason and logic, but that was one occasion I decided to just feel my feelings and I expressed it. He kind of did. He has his own vibe. I guess it works for him. But it's finally come true. I finally got my wish, Elliot. I called for his head. I've got it on a plate. I've got it on the barbecue. We'll miss all that side of it. It was kind of a nice vibe in the end. He did have the South American angle. I don't know that we leveraged that to the max. Gabriel Jesus, we kind of already knew about, as did Mikel. I don't know that we leveraged South America to the max. There's lots of opportunity to go forward. I'm okay with that. I'm very much with Clive on that point, though, that we need to find the right balance between somebody who's great for Mikel Arteta, but not necessarily somebody Mikel Arteta feels is working for him.
Clive?
Yeah, sorry. I remember we was at the Ali Pally, actually, and we was on the stage, and I was doing one of my waffling sessions, and I remember saying at the time, what we have to do is do succession planning. And the reason why, because I knew we just come through a fantastic season of record-breaking numbers, etc., etc. And don't think for a second that other clubs with similar ambitions are not watching where we've come from, right? So, and the people I was thinking about was mainly three people, actually. Edu, Arteta, and funny enough, is Carlos Cuesta, who I think is a super talent in the club and we need to look after. And there was some rumours around him. So Those are three people I was thinking about because they are the force for me behind the football side of things. And so if you're a smart club like, say, a Brighton, you should be succession planning all the time for this scenario, to make sure that we are comfortable moving forward. So this shocked me this morning, if I'm honest with you. But in some ways, when you have high quality people, high quality individuals, they are going to get headhunted. It's just going to happen. And the Nottingham Forest one is the number one story, but there have been other stories out there, and I'm sure he has a choice of many clubs to go to, as would Mikel Arteta if he was ever on the market. So what Eddie has done historically over, do you remember when we had to get rid of all the scouts and everyone was losing their minds? Remember when we had to pay the idiots off? Everyone's losing their minds when we were buying those young players. We've gone through a bit here, and he's reshaped the data side of things, Elliot, reshaped the moving away from the black book of Raul and being far more collaborative in how we approach decision making around recruiting players. And whether you want to measure him on the good recruits or the bad recruits, that's your choice. It's up to you. If you like him, you're going to remember ones that were not so successful. Sorry, if you don't like him, remember ones that are not so successful. And if you think he's done a good thing, then you remember all the successful. It's up to you. It's your choice. We don't really know how these things work. But what I do know, the painful side of things around cleaning up, he put himself out there. He cleaned up. He paid people off. With Mikel, they developed young players to keep us in the room until they matured, to a point where we've come second twice, and we're still up there right now. And it's not a good week to talk about Arsenal becoming results, but we're not a dog and duck, are we? We're still there, and he's been behind that, and he's been behind the cleansing of the club on the football side of things, and developing a new identity around the technical and the mental and the physical side. And we've got a team now that can play multiple ways, and is right there at the top end of the game in the Champions League, which wasn't the case when he joined in 2019. So I think it's a really positive role he's undertaken. However, in life, nothing ever stays the same. Renewal is part of things. Change is part of things. It's how you manage that change and how you take that change and make it an opportunity to develop your club in a better way. And I bet you, and I hope there are people there who are just chilling today in the club saying, right, let's go again. We are attractive, as Paul alluded to. Let's go again. How are we going to reshape this? Is there an organizational opportunity? And how can we develop the site? I look at it from a three-side perspective. I look at the academy, I look at the women's side, and the men's side. There's opportunities in all three of those departments to be better. So that's how I look at it. Let's get on with it, right? That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I think there's a few things to realize here. First and foremost, this is the best time to lose Edu. The worst time to lose Edu would have been when we lost Raul or when we got rid of Raul. It is much easier to try to continue to improve on and maintain the quality of this Arsenal than fix the broken Arsenal of 5 years ago. That was a difficult project. Identifying the path back to relevance, the path back to Champions League, the path back to title contention, that was difficult. That was a challenging path to navigate. That path has been navigated. We now have an excellent squad, rated as one of the most valuable in world football. And we simply need to continue to add quality on top of that, but we do not need to reshape the entire squad and entire club as we did at that time. So I think anybody with a good head on their shoulders who is able to work with Mikel Arteta and able to work with Josh Kroenke and Tim Lewis and Richard Garlick and James King, that person will probably succeed. I think the other reason this is not as hard as we think is that world football has changed. There's not a lot of secrets in the game anymore. Everybody's got the same data. Everybody's got the same Y-Scout account. There are people doing public scouting on Twitter that know the players that the clubs are looking at. The biggest thing that changed at Arsenal when David Dein left Arsenal, isn't that the intelligence of the club was drained. Arsene Wenger was always the genius and the architect of that Arsenal, but you have to have a sounding board. You have to have a check on your ideas. You have to have someone you trust who you bounce ideas off of and work, as Clive said, collaboratively. And that would be my single biggest worry, as Clive pointed out, is does Mikel Arteta simply fill up the power vacuum? and lose a sounding board, lose a person he trusts, who he can work with, who will maybe check some of his less good ideas and encourage some of his better ideas, because even the biggest geniuses in the world have good ideas and bad ideas. And having a railway manager, someone who flips the switcher to drive more of the things towards the good ideas and away from the bad ideas, is important. And so ultimately, the person who comes in more than anything needs to be able to work with Mikel Arteta to guide decision-making towards what's best for the club long-term, and be able to work up with Tim Lewis and Richard Garlick and ultimately Josh and Stan. But we have the data. We have a division of labor. We have distribution of responsibilities across the club, across multiple competent individuals. We have an excellent manager with a good vision, and we have a club that is in a good position. So I don't think this is cataclysmic by any means, and I don't think we need to read into it that this is because he couldn't work with Mikel or this or that. Let me tell you why people leave. More money, more power. He is getting more money and more power. You know the more money, more problems? It's actually more money, I'll take the job, thank you, is what it is. So triple your wages, more power in a global organization, a CEO label, of course, that's appealing. He's gone for it. I think maybe, given where we are right now, and it feels like something new is needed to push us over the next line, maybe the timing is good. Maybe the timing is good. If we're bumping up against the first ceiling this project has hit, maybe getting someone else in who will push us past that ceiling. Someone with a new idea that whispers something in Mikel's head, that triggers a new thought, that gets us going in a new direction. So I think we can start to turn towards the football side of things, but I'm quietly enthusiastic about this change, Clive, not because I have negative thoughts about Edu, but because I think the really big distance that needed to be traveled has been traveled. And now maybe there's a slight pivot or a slight move that needs to be made. And to your point, the thing I just most want to make sure is that Mikel has a trusted voice in the club that can not only carry his message to leadership, but check his message if it needs to be modified or checked or maybe even contradicted at times.
Yeah, for me, he needs a football partner. That's what he needs. Somebody that understands his technical direction of the team and enables that to help him make that happen. I want him I want our manager to focus on the football side of things, on the coaching side of things, to extract more performance out of the players that he has. I don't want him walking around with a briefcase like Arsene Wenger did towards the end of his time, when he was CEO, technical director, and manager and coach, and until he broke. Right, so that's not going to work in this environment where you have an away defeat, 2 away defeats, and things change. Right, your media profile changes with amongst the Arsenal fans, and so yeah, I'd much rather have. I don't want that to be him to be too stretched out. So I'm really interested to see what we do. I am genuinely interested to see what we do. If you look at the youth side of the game, we spoke to Art about it last week, didn't we? What's happening at that side of things? We need to get better there. There needs to be better infrastructure around the training ground and maybe the main ground as well. You got a situation with the women's team. There's Claire. I'm talking out of turn here because Tim knows this better than me. But Claire Wheatley is a senior person in that structure. Eddie is involved. Is the opportunity to restructure that part of the football world also as well, given its expansion and future expansion, a new TV deal upcoming? Does it need special attention? Is potentially a new manager coming in? So this is an opportune moment. I thought you spoke really well there. This is an opportune moment. The heavy, dirty lifting of paying off your skipper to leave in Aubameyang and watching other teams qualify for Europe while you miss out on a few points while you're giving a striker away. The painful stuff has been done. Now it's like, okay, the final piece is now, what do we need to do to be better as a club, as an organisation going forward? And I'm someone who just looks that way. You know, it's always about tomorrow. It's not about yesterday. It's always about the next thing you do. But you've got to learn lessons from yesterday. And I think that's important to make sure that everyone has their own checks and balances. And no one has an extraordinary influence over your culture of your club. No one person does that. It's a collective thing. That's the thing I'm not concerned about, but I'll have my eyes looking at it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and look, I want to say this. As fans, it's not our job to zoom out. As fans, it's our job to zoom way in and get really invested in the game that's kicking off tonight, right? That's fine. As a club, you have to zoom out. If you are feeling right now really down about Arsenal, because Arsenal lost a football match the other day and suddenly we're not sure we're going to win the title, I totally get that. But if you zoom out and look at the distance we traveled in 5 years as a club, it is nothing but an unqualified, staggering success. A success that Manchester United has not been able to manage, despite what they spend and the size of their organization and being the biggest club in England. A success that Chelsea has not managed, despite spending, I don't even want to venture a guess at how much, but probably over £1 billion, right? It is a success that really two clubs have managed. Liverpool, who were already in a position of exceptional success, and Manchester City, and we know the story there. No one else has managed it. Newcastle had new ownership come in. They're muddling around mid-table. They haven't really figured out how they want to leverage their resources to do things. So the distance we've traveled is an unqualified success. I get it. Zoomed in, it looks frustrating right now because we're not making that last step yet. But zoomed out, you simply cannot deny it's a big step that we've taken, thanks to Mikel, thanks to Edu, to Tim Lewis, to the group that have taken us here. Now, as a final point on this, there are people that are going to be worried. Well, now it's just going to be all Mikel Arteta. He's the only voice in the room. He's the only voice in the club that matters. First of all, I'm going to tell you something. You're probably somewhat right. Anytime I've been, told by anybody who's been to events at the club, when Mikel Arteta walks in a room, a hush falls over it. He carries that kind of weight inside the club. But I'm going to tell you something. This is every club. Maresca wanted Sterling gone. Sterling's gone. Ten Hag wanted to buy only players from teams he managed and from the Netherlands. They only bought Dutch players. It's not just the Klopps and the Artetas and the Peps getting what they want. It's the Ten Hags and the Marescas getting what they want. And the Eddie Howe's, right? And by the way, last time we had a manager who was just a coach and the club bought the players. It was Unai Emery asking for Zaha and Raul giving him £72 million Pepe. So let's not fall in love with any one model over the other. Yes, there need to be checks and balances, but in most clubs, the manager is the footballing brain of the club, and you commit to that. And that's a cycle, and you go through that cycle. And so we're in that cycle right now, and mostly it's been good. Paul, let's shift to the Newcastle game now, and it's a painful one. I think, in my mind, it is the worst performance of the season. And it's the first time when we played 11v11, and I don't think our game model worked, and I don't think we performed at the level we should. And I cannot help but think it starts with some decisions the manager has made that I find myself struggling with. And one of them is the lineup. Let's start with the lineup, and then I think that becomes an entry point to some squad questions and some tactical questions. What did you think of the decision against Newcastle to play Thomas Partey at right back, and go with that midfield, that same sort of 4-2-4 shape with Kai and Leo up front and Marino and Rice in midfield?
It was certainly the big decision, because it's really a question of where you play Thomas Partey for me. Do you play him just as the straight up DM, or do you do the right back thing that worked pretty well against Liverpool? And you can make the argument that, well, you play him at right back, then he steps into midfield, you have both, but you don't. You have a bit of both. And it's hindsight at this stage. One thing we really lacked was ball progression. Another was a little further up the pitch, some additional creativity. We had much more of a muscular, functional team with hopefully a little bit more sauce than they had, apart from in that dangerous combination between Gordon and Isak. It didn't really play out that way. It seemed like they've been a bit of our kryptonite for a little while, especially when we play at their place. We've struggled to get results. We've struggled to shine really there and play our football. And there's a bit of, sometimes other clubs get to do their plans and play their football, and their football on this day was stronger than ours. In terms of the lineup, I kind of get it in one way, in that I listened to the Eddie Howe presser before this game, and they played midweek on the Wednesday. They'd had their best game of the season in terms of performance. And so Eddie Howe is a 33-minute presser, which goes on and on and on, and he takes more and more questions, and they're largely about, hey, you've sucked for a while, but now you've done this thing with Gordon on the right-hand side, and you did it for this game situation. Are you going to have to keep doing it, or are you going to go back to your normal way? And he was a bit reticent to go into it too much, the way managers are. He wants a free hand. But it was very clear something had happened on the night. So I don't think there's any chance that Arsenal didn't know there was a strong probability he'd play Gordon down that side. And I think that may have affected who the left back choice might be. And rather than them setting up that way because of how they wanted to get at us, I think they set up because that's the best performance they've had this season, and they've just had it. They had Wednesday night, early Saturday, made the point they haven't had a chance to practice. They just came off a pitch with a way that worked, and I think they went at it again. And I think Mikel potentially was looking in part at who do I want on that side of the pitch. And when you look at your options, Zinchenko, Kivior, whatever, Miles Lewis-Skelly, I'd get why you'd want him there and do the party thing that you did against Liverpool. So that explains the first half to me. That's what I would say about the lineup. I get why he went with this lineup for the first half.
I just think we are finding now that these lineups point to something that I was talking about in a podcast back in September. At the beginning of September, I did a pod with you, Paul. We did a mailbag pod, and I said, we have a single point of failure in Martin Odegaard. Where are the profiles of players that are going to do what he can do? Link play between deepest part of midfield and the attacking third, but also in the attacking third, occupy central spaces, give us access to those areas, be creative. He is the leading chance creator in all of Europe last season. So who is the player who can come in and do that? And Mikel has basically said, here's who's going to do it. The press and set pieces. That's it. That's who's going to do it. The press and set pieces. And I just think we are in a squad situation right now where we've leaned on dual winning and we've leaned on physicality and we've leaned on all of these things that are good in our team. We've taken the things that are good in what we do and turned them up. But I think we've left a glaring hole in creativity, in midfield creativity in particular, Clive. And so we'll talk about how Newcastle blunted us a bit, but I want to get your take on this, because if you're going to get rid of Fabio Vieira and you're going to get rid of Emil Smith-Rowe and you're not going to have Odegaard available and you're not going to buy a player in that profile, then I think you have to play Ethan Nwaneri. Yes, he's 17. That's the guy in your squad who can do the thing this team doesn't do. So how is this lineup supposed to break down that mid-block that we've struggled with so much anyway over the past few seasons?
Yeah, you can criticize the lineup, which is your right, but I don't think, in my opinion, that you should fall on the solution being a 17-year-old, because that's not fair for him to carry the club.
But that's who he's left with. He didn't go get someone.
Hold on a second. There's more than one way to play. There's more than one way to play, right? So I've seen this 4-2-4, 4-4-2 shape work. One of the big reasons why it's worked is our fullbacks have been quite punchy. They've been up and down that side, so they create late triangles by arriving. And so what happens, you get punch and go forward from the sides, right? So in this game, last game, we've got a situation where we've got Thomas Partey on one side being pinned back by Joel Linton. Oh, guess what? The opposition team has disconnected our right-hand side. Why would they do that? Because that's where all our attacks come down from. That's where all our danger is, all our goals and assists. Any analyst will tell Eddie Howe that's what you need to do. I gave examples at the weekend. That's what Aston Villa did with Zaniolo. They pinned him back. What did Tuchel do at Bayern Munich? Disconnected our right-hand side. And so that's the problem. We got disconnected on our right-hand side. We still created chances, but we didn't finish them from the right-hand side. But that was a problem. We lack ball progression. So who's our best ball progressors in the team, in the squad? You got Partey, you got Jorginho, you got probably Odegaard, are our ball progressors. Saliba's a good ball progressing pass into the last third.
Zinchenko,
again, just back from injury, played in the week. And so, yeah, we lacked a bit of ball progression. We lacked a bit of central presence. Me personally, it's my own bias. I don't like to see Kai Havertz overlapping Bukayo Saka on the right wing. That, to me, is not the best use of that resource, right? So in 2024, when he's played as a central striker where he's allowed to travel and put centre-backs under pressure, we have done really, really well. So I thought he was too wide for me, and I don't really see why we couldn't stress Newcastle centre-backs a bit more. That put a lot of onus onto Trossard, who for me does not protect the ball in central zones with his back to goal. Just doesn't do it very well. When he comes on the side, receives it, gets his head up, he's a very good connector. He can turn away from pressure and make the passes, but he's out of form at the moment. And so that put a lot of onus on there. So what that means is you can key on people. You can key on our wide men if our central players not where they should be. So what did our wide men have to do on the day? They had a situation where Martinelli was doubled up and Saka was doubled up. Newcastle did their 4-5-1, make sure they double teamed the sides. By the way, they've done this to us at home 3 years ago. This is a game plan that Eddie Howe's done before. In that game where the ball's on the pitch for 38 minutes or something like that, he did exactly the same things. We played outside their shape. He doubled up on the wingers, kicked them to death, made when the ball went out, everyone sat down. He's done this before. It's what they do, right? The thing is, you just can't concede. We conceded, and so we fall into their plan. And so I don't mind this system to get away from the Odegaard football, right? So I didn't like the Bournemouth system where we used Marino as Odegaard. I didn't like that. That didn't work for me. And you know what, Elliot? Also we talk quite a lot, and we talk about attacking side of things. And the other week when we played Bournemouth, I started to watch other teams. And I went straight to watch the City game. And what I noticed, mate, was how many people they had up the pitch. And I use the term to you guys, we've got too many behind the ball players.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I picked that term, because every time I look at the pitch now, I see too many people behind the ball and not enough people up the pitch. And then when we do go up the pitch, everyone knows where we're going. And so they get there really quickly and stop us. And we've become, for me, a little bit risk averse. We've got too many people happy to get it to feet, to get it up and move it to the side. And we haven't got enough people prepared to carry and take the risk to get us go forward. And what I loved about Calafiori and loved about Timber in the Man City game in the first half, I love their go forward. I love their bravery to go off first phase in behind of a goal kick. Just go forward, disrupt, distract. We might be getting it from Odegaard, but we get it from other areas. And when you see people prepared to move forward, you know what you get? You get ball progression, because people see them moving and they pass it to them. I thought our movement up front was predictable. I thought we lacked penetration in our movement, particularly at a big mid block. We didn't move them around enough in phases. We just didn't do what we should do. We were flat on the day. And so I don't believe, you look at the squad, this is my personal opinion, I'm not expecting everyone to agree with me. I don't believe you look at the squad and say, who's the closest to Odegaard? I want to get back to Odegaard football and then make a 17-year-old it. I don't think that's fair. I really don't think that's fair, because I don't think it's right for him to carry the burden of our creativity at that age. And by the way, no one on this podcast was bigging up Fabio Vieira as a solution. And Smith Rowe has been, well, we watched him in the summer. We watched Vieira in the summer. And I had to protect him on this podcast, protect him saying he's trying to work his way in. And Ethan Nwaneri was deemed to be ahead of him in the pecking order. And I agree with that decision. Yeah. I really do agree with that decision. But it doesn't, Vieira was never given the responsibility of being the Odegaard. And he is older.
He wasn't the answer for us.
He wasn't the answer.
No, he wasn't the answer for us.
We have to accept we made a decision to pathway young players. It doesn't mean we should make a decision to destroy them. Honestly, we have to do this properly and find a way to play our football with the experienced internationals that we have in our squad, many of them who are out of form. I'd rather look there than look at a 17-year-old.
All we can do is give our personal opinion on this podcast. We don't run Arsenal Football Club, and we don't have access to the same information that they do. So I'm going to give my opinion. I think we made a decision on the style of player we wanted to add to our midfield this summer, and I think we made the wrong choice. I do. That doesn't mean I think Marino's a bad player, and it doesn't mean I don't think Marino will be an important part of this team, which as we get on later in this pod, I still think we have every chance to win the title. But I really believe that this team is missing another central creator, another tight space operator who wants the ball to feet between the lines and can create things and do things that are interesting. Now, one of our best moves in the first half came at the very end when Thomas Partey held the ball. No one's moving. So he strides out, finally sees Marino get into a little pocket of space, punches a beautiful ball into the half space. Marino, 2 touches, 1 to get it, 1 to clear it, passes it to Martinelli, and behind him, Martinelli kind of wastes the opportunity. It was a nice little move. The rest of the game, Newcastle played their 4-5-1 and said, go wide. And we went wide. And I don't think we did anything to help our wide players, both Saka and Martinelli. Scott produced some good stats, and here's a good one. We had one overlap the whole game. So you're going to give it to your wide players against a team that's telling you to give it to the wide players and then going to double up on them, and you're not going to do anything to give them associative players next to them or overlaps to take defenders away. Now, maybe Marino's going to grow into the type of role I'm talking about, but for me, Paul, we were saying it in September, so this is not being wise after the fact. I can show you the transcript of the pod where we said, it feels to me like Odegaard has to play every game this season. And I said on that pod, Clive, to the point, I said, the alternate is a 17-year-old, and it's not fair to put that burden on him at this time. But if it's not fair to put that burden on him at this time, then it is your obligation to bring someone into the group who can be that Odegaard analog, either when Odegaard doesn't play or in addition to Odegaard. When you look at City and Liverpool, the one thing you see in those teams is they play all kinds of attacking eights. They play 10s at 8s. They play 2 attacking 8s. I'm not saying we have to play 2 attacking 8s, but I think we need to have 2 attacking 8s, and I don't think we do. So for me, Paul, what I think we're seeing a little bit right now is that our press creates chances, great. Our set pieces create chances, great. But from in possession, open play, teams know if they mid-block us, we're going to struggle to unlock that, especially without Odegaard. And I just, unfortunately, without Odegaard against a mid-block, I don't see us fixing this because I don't see the tools there unless we do decide to make a 17-year-old the answer, which I totally agree with Clive is a big ask and not fair.
Yeah. Look, if you were to say we're going to miss Odegaard for half a season, I'd tell you we're not winning the league. If you were to tell me City were going to have to play half a season, turns out a full season without Rodri, I'd say they may not win the league because they have a level, they have a squad, they just have that bit more as a starting point, but they may not win the league. And you can see at the moment that there's a gap there for somebody. If you told me that Liverpool were going to have to play the season without either Van Dijk, I think, or Salah, I'd say they won't be in with the sniff. So, yeah.
Can I stop you just for 1 second? Because I just want to say one thing. I totally agree with you. And I have been making the argument to anyone who will listen that if you ignore injuries as a reason for a season not to achieve what it should, then you're not being fair. There is no team that loses key players for long stretches that doesn't have their season impacted by it. But I think you could say, Paul, that at City, for example, they have Kovacic, who is meant to do some of the things Rodri does. He's never going to be as good as Rodri. I think it is fair to say we literally don't have a guy to play when Odegaard doesn't play, who at least operates in the same zones and does the same kind of things, unless you want to point to one area. And that, to me, I think looked like an oversight from the summer. It feels that way to me,
Look, Elliot, I'm making your point back to you that you made earlier in the season because I knew that would get agreement from you.
Carry on.
And yet you're tripping me up and contradicting me. So the thing is, Kovacic, I don't know if you know this, he's nothing like Rodri.
Yeah.
He's the guy they play instead of him. He ain't winning the Ballon d'Or next year. Chelsea were fine selling him for decent money. He's a very good player, but Real Madrid didn't fight the world to hold on to him. Chelsea didn't fight the world to hold on to him. He ain't it for a Rodri. Now, they're going to be better without Rodri than we're going to be without Martin Odegaard because we don't have 18 play. They got Bernardo Silva. They got guys all over the place that can do stuff, do all sorts of different roles. We're not quite there yet. We needed things to run for us. If Mikel Arteta had unlimited funds, he's at the roulette table in Monte Carlo. He's betting on red and black. He's betting on all the numbers. He's going to win every roulette turn because he's infinitely funded. He made some choices and the wheels spun. And like you're saying, Marino ain't it. Yeah, but he wanted a Marino. That's what assuming that his key players were available for most of the season, which they've generally been.
Yes.
That was the bet he made.
And by the way, I'm not saying Marino ain't it. I'm saying Marino ain't the Odegaard analog. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and to your point of, well, he needs to have somebody who can do a lot or most of what Odegaard can do. Okay, but let's assume that takes a big chunk of change, right? Which means he doesn't get something else he wanted. He doesn't get Calafiori. He doesn't get Marino, or he keeps Vieira and prays that's going to turn into something. It wasn't. I think he went with the Nwaneri option, not for the first half of the season, because that'd be absolutely nuts, but that he can play important minutes as the season went on and play a more significant role in the second half of the season. But he's never going to be a starter 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
He hinted that, the boy's still growing into his body and that he's had a history. He didn't say he's had a history with growth spurts, but he talked about what happens which implies the boy has been transitioning in terms of growing into he's not ready to. All of those worries about Bukayo Saka playing all those minutes, because a young player, if you do that, you turn into Wayne Rooney at this or that or the other. I get all that, but I don't think it applies to every player equally. I don't think it particularly applied to Saka, as we're seeing. It apparently does apply to Nwaneri. So I think we cool our jets, and that's one where we don't question when the manager plays him or doesn't. I know that's going to be hard for people because we have this dearth of creativity. He came on in the second half. He was okay. I don't think he showed us a bit of stuff, but he didn't. There was more space in the second half, and he didn't change our fortunes.
Yeah, it's tough because you're a prisoner to the way you see football, right? Who did I want in the summer? I wanted Eberechi Eze, right? Now, he might have been the absolute wrong signing for us, but I wanted him because I'm a prisoner to how I see football. Really good in tight spaces, very technical, likes to go forward, has a shot on him, can get into the box on his own. Of course, it looks great after you've just scored no goals against Newcastle, but that might have been the wrong choice. And by the way, Mikel Merino could be excellent. We have definitely leaned into a sort of profile. And if you look at the muscular midfield of sort of Rice and Marino and Kai Havertz, they can win duels. Well, the funny thing, this was our lowest duel winning percentage of the season. So that is also a concern, because if your model is we're going to press and we're going to win duels and we're going to win games through that approach, we didn't do that in this game either. This was just a stinker. We laid an egg, basically, is what happened. And Clive, I do think that some of this goes to the decision to play Partey at right back. And I'm curious what you think of that versus trusting a Kivior or a Zinchenko, playing Timber at right back, and then having the opportunity to get some overlaps, to maybe have Partey playing some of those progressive passes from midfield and having an extra player to get forward. Because we went to Porto. We saw the Porto game up close. When teams mid-block us, we have struggled. This is not new. The funny thing is people are going to want to focus on our defense because we're not keeping a lot of clean sheets. We're third in XG conceded. We've been a bit unfortunate. We've run cold with some of the goals we've conceded, but our defense is fine. We saw it against City when we needed to bunker. We've seen it against PSG. We can still defend. They created one chance and they scored from it. Otherwise, I think they had 0.5 XG in this game. To me, 5 times last season, we didn't score a goal. Twice already this season, we haven't scored a goal. So if the solution isn't personnel, we obviously can't go buy another Odegaard. How do we get out of this trap of mid blocks stifling us the way Newcastle were able to pretty easily?
Yeah, we should have had a goal earlier, but the problem is still there, right? The problem is still there,
Yeah, we didn't create enough.
The problem is still there, and it's about our movement, it's about our movement and lack of, right? So, like I said on the IR, I'm going to repeat myself because not everyone listens to us on the IR. But the way to beat Arsenal is to pin our right side and to stand in the mid block and force us to either go over top, have a keeper sweeper in behind, and test us to go out wide, play outside of their shape, really focus on our right-hand side, triple team that and double team the left-hand side. Make our left-hand side beat you, which is yet to do, right? And make sure you compete in the interior. If they play a square pass, transition on them. Very, very simple. Don't overpress. Press in phases. Don't be too aggressive because they'll play into central areas and they'll find their forwards. Just stand and shadow mark and test them. And what do? We take the easy option and we come to feet. Knock it to me. Knock it to me. Knock it to me. Who's prepared to run through? Until Partey went to 6 and Declan Rice decided, I'm taking this ball forward, then all of a sudden, we created chances. And I'll tell you what, mate, I wanted Eze at that moment, Elliot. I wanted him for this game state. Do you see what I mean? He would have ripped this one a new one. He would have attracted people to him, ran past somebody from the left-hand side on his right foot, travelling, and popped the ball off, and we'd be in behind them. But we've chosen another way. And by the way, before the season started, to having somebody else to play in that role, given the fact that Thomas Partey didn't play much last season, I don't think any of us could predict he'd play the most outfield minutes of anybody else in the whole squad this season. And that position is now thinking, maybe we could have, if he knew he was going to be this fit, we could have maybe done with another offensive player. Do you see what I mean? Someone like an Eze, I'm using as an example. And so for me, it's a collective thing. And let's go through it, right? Ben White, he's not fit. So he's there on the paper, he's not fit. Saliba had a bit of a rough international break. And I'll be honest with you, he's not at his top level, and he admitted it himself. Gabriel, back off the injury, he didn't look fit and sharp and firing and like he did at Spurs and at Villa. He wasn't back to his normal self. Timber looked like his normal self, to be fair. He's now had his little injury. He looked back to normal. Partey was fine. Rice was steady, right? So people want Rice as a 6. When we're 1-0 down for 12 minutes, is that the 6 we want? Or do you want the 8 you saw in the last 25 minutes? Because I know which one I prefer. It's a choice. It's a personal choice, right? So Trossard, gone missing. Where's he gone? Right, Jesus, where is he? Havertz, since his injury pre-national break, he's looked absolutely knackered. He showed sparks at Preston, but again, I think he's been misused and he's not at his top level. Odegaard's not there. Saka's here, carrying everyone in his rucksack. Martinelli's in and out, looks great, works very hard, not a sure bet at the moment, making a few wrong decisions. So we're not in form. We are not in form. And so structurally, I feel we're not in the best place to even show what structure can work because we're just not there at the moment. We're not present. And this happens. And it's crazy when it happens because you never see it coming and you never see us getting out of it. I remember the West Ham, Fulham, Liverpool period last season. I thought, oh my God, we're never going to win a game again. This is awful. Do you know what I mean? And suddenly we clicked and we're back in it and we didn't lose for flipping months. I couldn't see the Fulham game coming. Just couldn't see it. We went 1-0 up. There's no way you could tell me we're going to lose that game. We lost that game. West Ham, they got battered. Can't believe lost that game 2-0. And then we come to Liverpool in the cup game and we batter them, lose the game 2-0. And Elliot, I couldn't tell you where next win was coming from. That's a lesson to myself. Don't throw the baby out of the bathwater. Let's get people back healthy, fit, in the right frame of mind and remind ourselves what we're trying to achieve this season. If it needs a players' meeting, sorry, mate. If it needs a players' meeting, well, I don't care what it needs. Remind ourselves, hey, lads, we need to get back on this because we can't leave ourselves too much to do, right? And so that's where I am a bit at the moment, mate.
The worst thing you can do is use the worst performance of the season as the way to evaluate a squad and a team. Because obviously, if you evaluate the squad and the team at the point of the worst performance of the season, you're going to think the team sucks. Fulham away last season was our worst performance of the season. And after that game, we were 5 points back of Manchester City. We were in 4th place with Spurs right on our heels and 20 games played. Okay? So at that moment, all hope was lost. Everything was bad, right? And we were having some of the same conversations, by the way, about the attack and things like that. And we know it turned around. I think this team is built to still be able to go on very long runs. I mean, look, if you told me we were going to have full fitness the rest of the season, I'd say we win the league. Because I still think this team, when it has the 11 it wants to put out there most of the time, is the best in the league. I really believe that. And I believe we can win in all phases. We can win with our press. We can win from open play. We can win from set pieces. Right now, we're playing with a number of pieces missing. We're playing with a midfielder at right back. We're playing without... Let's remember, Odegaard is not just our key playmaker. He was our player of the season last season. Okay? So if you want to say, well, City are playing without Rodri, obviously they'll be worse. Well, we're playing without our player of the season for 4, 5, 6 weeks. And we're obviously worse. Clive, you wanted to come back on that?
Well, yeah, it's an area that I'm not an expert on. And I feel, and I've not seen this for a while, is the press angle of things. We are not sharp on the press and people are getting through us.
Nope.
And I've
Yep.
just not seen that for a while. So we can talk about vagaries of form, which we can discuss, and we'll get much disagreement where we are on form and individuals. But structurally, we're off, mate. We were getting popped in that first half. We weren't getting to the ball. We weren't mid-blocking. We weren't aggressive in our press. We were a step slow. Some of that's integration of Marino. I'm afraid it's very tough for him to come into this league to an away game like that. And it was tough. And it's a problem for us. I don't think Trossard is quite as sharp pressing as an Odegaard is, as a Havertz is. And so we're getting popped. We're getting popped around. And like I say, other people are better at this than me. I tend to not look at this side of the game too heavily. But that's my gut feeling, Elliot. And that creates instability. And from instability, you know what you get? You get you want to control things. So I need to settle this down. So what do? You start getting comfortable passing sideways. Yeah, and not running. Where you need to shoot, you need someone to say, no, we're going for them. We need to be aggressive. We need to make them defend, move them around, distraction running, underlaps, run through. Don't get comfortable in your passing shape and false control, because you'll end up with a pass map, which I've seen on the weekend, which is Horseshoe City, right? Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could hang that over your cattle ranch as your logo. It would be a nice horseshoe right there hanging over your cattle ranch. Paul, I think the press is a question. And this is where I think Mikel's making some choices that are impacting what we want to do as a fundamental part of our game. Thomas Partey at right back makes sense in possession in the first phase of buildup, right? He can come inside and essentially functions as a midfielder. You know who's one of our most important pressers? Ben White. We want the ball to go out wide, and then Ben White jumps, and we trap those players against the touchline, right? Our left back also does that. Who are our two pressing triggers at the top? Kai and Odegaard. Well, we don't have Odegaard now, so we have Leo, and Leo is not nearly as effective in that role. And so that 4-2-4 shape with Leo up there with Kai and Partey at right back, I think it is easier to play around, and we're seeing teams more easily find the way out. And once they find the way out, we sink into our low block. We're very willing to do that. And all of a sudden, our impetus, our control, the pressure we exert is much lower. When we win games and dominate teams, we pin them back, and they have to face Bukayo in the attacking third, and Martinelli in the attacking third, and Kai in the box, and Leo around the edge, and be under pressure. When we don't win games, we spend a lot of time building from back to front in the midfield, going around the horseshoe. And that's what Newcastle was able to get us to do. And I think some of that is our lack of pressure. So what do you think of that? The loss of our pressing intensity as a result of who we're selecting and that shape? And if maybe, because Mikel made a comment after the match, like, I had to play Partey at right back because I didn't have any right backs. With all due respect to the man, we know that's not a full truth, because the full truth is you could have played Timber at right back if you trusted Kibby or Zinchenko or Miles Lewis-Skelly. So, we're on to you, mate. So what do you think of that in terms of the team he's picking and how it's not just impacting the attack, but the ability to keep teams hemmed in? Yep. But you will have to come off mute to answer it.
Sorry about that. I don't think the press problem is necessarily the front six. I think I've seen Trossard pressing pretty well. I mean, he's not going to be as good as Odegaard, but it's pressing. You don't have to be brilliant. You just need to be at the level and a bit. And I think he does that. We've moved Havertz to the right of him where he would normally be to the left. So maybe there's a little bit lost there in translation. A little bit, though. You still got Saka, Martinelli, both excellent pressers. I don't think there's really an excuse for having a front four like that in the press not being good. Behind them, you have Marino and Rice. Okay, they're new to it, but Marino's actually an excellent presser. That's part of his sauce. Rice is an excellent presser. That's a hell of a front six to press with. So if it's not working, then you say, well, is it, to Clive's point, is it White coming in? You still got Saliba and Gabriel, two excellent steppers into midfield with the guy to make sure that they're coming to the next line of press. You got Raya, an aggressive goalkeeper who can. I don't think there's a lot of reasons why the press shouldn't work, even with Trossard, even with Havertz. It should still be an excellent press. They're all intelligent players. Most of them do this job week in, week out. So might actually be that Newcastle are really good at playing through it and have excellent out options that you have to cover with Timber and Partey, who can't, maybe White might have struggled even a little bit in this pressing system. Bruno's really good to play out, and he hits Isaac or Gordon and you're in trouble. So you gotta cheat a little bit on our side to make sure you don't get hit on the counter. I was, as we do in the game over the weekend, you and I, Elliot, I had a piece of paper in front of me. I was making little notes.
Yes, Sam.
And around the 11th minute, I was writing on my page, Newcastle look very dange. I got as far as dange. And suddenly that thing happened where the Isaac dropped it. Like, you could see that they had a way of hurting us through Gordon on the right-hand side. Things were starting to happen where I'm like, they're getting at us. I'm not feeling comfortable. Now, I don't write that on my piece of paper more than once every 3-4 games. I could see that although this looked like a kind of even sort of a game, they had a way, they had a combination that was ripe to hurt us, and it did. And I wonder if that pulls at your press a little bit, but I don't have a great answer for why our press shouldn't work. It won't be quite as good as it would have been if we had it should be very, very good with those players there. You lose a little bit maybe off the fullbacks, but I mean, the front six, Timber's willing to step forward. Partey's going to step more into midfield, but I think that's okay to support the press. I don't see a reason why we shouldn't be able to press well. I could see it in previous games because we had all sorts of things. But with the personnel in this game, it might just be that Newcastle's really good at that, playing out from the back. And they had a great threat, and we had to cheat a little bit backwards to cover it.
Yeah. I'm not worried about the goal. There's a bad clearing header from Partey. It's a bit unlucky. They get the ball to Gordon quickly, and Gordon puts in an inch-perfect cross for an excellent run from Isaac and a brilliant header. We've seen players miss easier chances. We've seen more dangerous positions not turn into goals. Sometimes you're going to concede a really good goal. I am much more concerned with the lack of threat. Excuse me. Sorry. Clive.
I'm with you.
I know there's frustration with Martinelli, and I understand it. But I think both in terms of Saka and Martinelli, the number of 1v2 situations they were in without a lot of support is going to make them look less influential. We had 11 touches in the box in the second half when we needed a goal, and that's not us. So what are your thoughts on the Martinelli performance and the extent to which some of this is individuals just needing to play better and the extent to which it's partnerships? Because I don't know that I think Merino, that left 8 role really plays a role in helping the wide player. Odegaard does it with Saka a lot, right? Are we getting that associative play on that side? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, so Marino, Trossard, and Martinelli, they weren't in our stock risings, were they? Right.
No.
So there you go. And so that's it really. Again, you know me. I have a line down the middle of the pitch when I look at a pitch. And you tell me which side of the line Eddie Howe really cares about stopping the most. It's on our right side, right?
Yeah.
So, and as far as I'm concerned, and I remember all the painful defeats we've had, it's a lot of them come when our right side is stymied in some way. And the one thing, and Elliot, you can, around the transfer market, the one thing that's concerned me a little bit is I don't think we've fixed the problem of our left side attacking wise yet. And we haven't got the player that says, we got to mark Saka and the other bloke. Now that other bloke could be one of 4 players, Martinelli, Jesus, Sterling, or Trossard. And I ask you, look at those 4 players right here, right now, is that enough? And some people say, Clive Jesus is not a lefty. I actually think he can play left. And I would have played him left for this game because I knew Newcastle would come into us. I knew we had to go over him. And I think he's a good player for that first ball, for the first phase of the game. Right? So that's what I would have done. But hey, look, It doesn't really matter. And so if you want Arsenal to make the next step, I think it's on our left side. Now, I wasn't saying this when Calafiori was charging through the left side and attracting people and popping that ball off. Because that left side was working then, wasn't it, Paul? It was working then.
Yep.
Well, we had punch, we had go forward. And I wasn't saying this then. You take him out and we're a bit more static. Excuse me. You take him out, we're a bit more static. Again, Newcastle played it sweet. The one player that was going to go forward was going to be Timber. What did they do?
Yep.
Stick their best player on him and say, you stand on his toes, and we'll have Joel Linton stand on Partey's toes. We just whack it in the air to him to pin him back. Because last time I looked, when he played behind Havertz and Saka against Southampton, they had about 1 million touches. He kept force feeding them. So he didn't break that connection real quick, you know? And we're going to make Declan Rice pass forward. Well, it didn't happen, right? It didn't happen. And this is what I want to say. You know, I said this at the IR, and I kept myself quiet because I just knew this day was coming. Declan Rice has to develop into an all-round six, and he's not there yet. And we need to take on that development. So if we need to play in there, then fine. We're going to get some pain. If Marino's your 8, he needs to get fit firstly, so he can get to the press. He can be aggressive. And if he's your 8, we need to play him through this period. Because to take your words, Elliot, we're in the lab, mate, with those two at the moment. Because you've shifted one positionally and the other one's learning the league. Right? So, and when we had a slightly different dynamic, we look more like our team. And we'll soon look like our team when Odegaard comes back in. Right? But one of the things I praise the manager for is the multiple ways he's allowed us to play. And we were not able to do that at the weekend for the first time in a while, where we have no caveats of a sending off or an injury late in the game, etc., etc. And so we were done good and proper, right? Maybe we could have nicked one at the end. Would have been nice. I'm sick of them laughing at us when they take the points.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Declan Rice needs to head the flipping thing and we're fine, you know? And but it doesn't stop me seeing what that I'm seeing. Our left-hand side is not strong enough to underpin the right-hand side. And this is we need to accept this as Arsenal people. We need to improve form or change. Because we've got enough data to tell us. And someone's going to say to me, but Clive, Saka's only scored one more goal than Martinelli this season. Well, you're not watching the games then, mate. You need to watch the games and look at his goals impacts and his impact on the right-hand side and what he does. You're not watching, you know? So we need more impact from the left-hand side. And I don't know how we're going to do it, but it needs to happen because the next game plan for Inter Milan, guess what it's going to be? The game plan for Chelsea, guess what it's going to be? You know, so the left-hand side has to step up to allow people to not key on our right-hand side.
Yeah. And I don't know that we have the fix currently for that situation in every game, in every game state. I mean, Mikel Merino, by the way, like the one thing we knew, we weren't sure what the passing was going to look like or the final third stuff was going to look like, but the guy for multiple seasons had won the most duels in all of Europe, 2 of 4 on ground duels, 2 of 4 on aerial duels. Not what you'd expect. And to me, physically looks like he's still coming to terms with the league. Been down on the ground a bit, been a little slow to second balls a bit. I'm not saying he's not going to get there, but it's a different league, different pace, different physicality. And certainly when you play Newcastle, because they were going to put physical players around that area, and they did. And it was not a great day for that side of the game. And Mikel talked about that in his post-match comments, by the way, and basically said, we didn't deal with the physical side as well as we could have. The other thing he did that was weird, Paul, is he called out big missed chances. You know, he said Mikel with 1, Rice with 2, Gabby with 1. It's multiple times now he's called out Gabby for not taking big chances. I don't know which one he's talking about. The only big chance in the game I really can think about is the Declan Rice back post header at the end, which he should do much better with. And maybe we're talking about eking out a draw in our worst performance of the season, which you'd take. But as we start to turn the corner here, I think the in-game management question comes to mind for me, which is simply, once it was becoming clear that we were going wide into 2v1s, once it was becoming clear that we were not getting anything at the top of the box or the edge of the attacking third centrally, I think we had to try to change things. Was he slow in your mind? I mean, at halftime, I was convinced he was going to change it. Not just because we were behind, you can rescue it, but because we'd gotten it wrong. I think we'd gotten it wrong. I think the shape we'd picked and the team we picked and what Newcastle decided to do, Eddie Howe, this happens. Eddie Howe got it right. And he did something that was working, that was negating us. Would you have liked to have seen a change sooner to try to counter what they had done and maybe try to find a different way through?
I mean, maybe a little, but you have, as a manager, you think, I'll get them in at halftime. I'm going to fix some things. There's no way a manager who sees the game like an Arteta does looks at the first half and doesn't think they're not quite doing what I wanted them to do. I'm going to give them 10, 15 minutes after the second half to execute the plan correctly. Obviously, he had a plan. It wasn't working very well in the first half. I think he gets them in at halftime, says, okay, guys, remember we said do this, do that. Now they're set up. Maybe we're doing a couple of things on their side that weren't anticipated. So, that was a pretty good starting lineup, even if we would have done it differently. 11 strong players on the pitch. He had a plan. I think he gave the second half another chance to make something different happen. And maybe he didn't love his options because, who came on? Zinchenko on 60 minutes and Nwaneri. So maybe he didn't fancy playing either one of those guys for 45 minutes. I'm very much in the camp that I will trust the manager on how and when he uses Nwaneri because there's too much I don't know about that player. And I think both players did some different things that gave us a little bit of a different look, but they didn't move the needle massively. And probably his best option was to get this team firing. The 11 he sent out in the first half to make that work. But the immovable object in this was Newcastle, who were extremely well set up, 5 across the middle, know how to do this thing, dangerous on the counter. And we do need to accept that if we're not at our best moment going to St. James's Park, we're going to struggle there, and we continue to struggle there. And it wasn't until we basically said, oh, screw it, everybody forward, everybody attack, take all the risks. And they thought, hang on, let's hang in there, let's sit deep, and let's hold on to what we got, that it looked like we might get something out of this game. In a sense, our game plan never worked at St. James's Park at the weekend because it was both teams basically falling into we'll have a go at you, and the other side saying, okay, we're going to sit in.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's a pretty straightforward question then, Clive. Are we short an attacker? He didn't want to bring in Sterling for this game. He didn't play. And I think we haven't seen a huge we haven't gotten a real good picture of what he's going to be for us yet. And I think it's way too early to be drawing complete conclusions, but this would have been a situation where maybe he could have come in.
He's making choices. He's making choices. He's making selections, right? He played Trossard and he brought Jesus on. He's not idiots. He's a 27 and a 29-year-old, and he didn't choose Sterling. That's his choice.
Do we have enough quality in our attacking group?
That's what I did. Go rewind back to what I just said. You know, and rewind to what. But let's ask ourselves: do we have enough quality on that left-hand side? Do we really? I'm not sure we fixed that problem. However, I will say this, and by the way, players that don't play always get better. You know, Fabio Vieira is looking quite good today, right? Do you know what I mean? So basically, if you watch Sterling, and I have watched him in European games and in the League Cup games, etc. He has this lovely way of running out to in behind, particularly off the left-hand side. That is exactly what we needed for this game. That exact run, which he can do now, which is one of the best things he does do, because when he carries the ball, I think he's a little bit in and out. But his off-the-ball movement is brilliant. This was an off-the-ball running game to move a mid-block around. He was exactly the right player for this. Did I say that before on our preview on Friday, Elliot? No, I didn't. Because you know what? Last season, I'd forgotten Newcastle's setup because I was so fuming at the goal. I forgot what they did to us 2 years ago at home in a 0-0. I just remembered when we smashed them in the home game. I'd forgotten the internal shape they have. You know, I hadn't really focused on the mid-blocks in the same way. I didn't know they'd do the Joel Linton thing. And so they caught me out a little bit. Sterling was the answer. He was the answer to run in behind. By the way, I say Sterling, but that type of movement was the answer.
Right.
And this is my issue with Martinelli, because his number one trick is his mobility. He can run all day long. He just needs to vary his movement and make sure that he moves people around, because Livermore knew exactly what he was going to do. I'm going to show you down my right side. Touchline is my friend. You're not going to come inside on me. And I think I can sprint with you if I've got a little head start. That's what he did. And he gave it to him. And he allowed him to get kicked in the corner flag and get the crowd up. I mean, it's just like move him around, running his inside shoulder. Make him think I'm going to go inside him. Run off the ball. Even just go and do it anyway. Because what it does, it makes people think you're going to do it. Go straight along the back line. I thought Timber made one great run in the first half. He went straight in behind from the goal kick from Raya's hands. I thought that's what you need to do. You need to vary your movement. And I don't think we did. And Elliot, this is not the first time we've seen this system work against us. So I was disappointed that we didn't recognise what to do. So I'm much more disappointed in the lack of recognition of the game we need to actually have against them. I'm more disappointed in that than I am individuals, because individuals have a bad game and have good games, and we'll do this forever. So I'm not going to kill anybody for having a bad game, but we didn't make the right movements to beat that system, and we chose another way. That wasn't smart. That's on us as a club, as a coaching group, and players, rather than picking out individuals. So I'm not going to do that, because there's the individuals who barely lost the game in 2024. But we need to sharpen up, don't we? We need to sharpen up and get our game on, particularly on the left-hand side of the pitch, because we look a little bit predictable at the moment.
Yeah. And Paul, look, I think there's ways to fan, right? One way to fan is when you lose a game, you go to a dark place and everything's bad. And another way to fan is you lose a game and you beat your chest and you become a supporter and you say, we go again. And like both of those things are fine. Analytically, I think this is tricky because this has been a very, very hard season to analyze. You have 3 games that are 10 men. You played at Villa, at Spurs, at City, at Newcastle. You've played Liverpool, where you finished the game with a back line of Miles Lewis-Skelly, Kivior, White, and Partey. This has been a very hard game to season analyze. We played 6 weeks without our player of the season from last season. We played Bournemouth without Bukayo Saka and 10 men, right? Like there's, and sometimes what's excuse making to one person is explanation to another person. And so these are difficult things to analyze. I do find it funny that the minute Rodri got injured, everybody universally said, oh, this could be a tough season for City. And yet the same analysis isn't applied to the kind of situation we found ourselves in. So any conclusion you draw right now is going to be, to some extent, contaminated by the extent to which you don't consider these extenuating circumstances. Having said that, there's a lot of retconning right now, or not retconning, reviewing that's happening of our summer business and the question of whether we prioritize the right areas. We did go for another defender, one with an injury track record who has been injured. The only attacker we wound up getting was a deadline day loan for a player whose motivations and level was not totally known. And we went for a midfielder who was a dual winner out of La Liga with certain qualities that are maybe different from others we could have prioritized. And so there are people, I think, asking questions about whether the direction we went in the summer addressed the areas of greatest need. Because after the Bayern tie last season, the word that was put out by the club is that Mikel and Edu both felt we were lacking that one explosive attacking player that could have unlocked that game for us. And that in the summer, that would be a priority. And it doesn't feel that we powered up our attack. And I do think our defense is fine and will be fine, but I feel our attack is not powered up enough. Do you think it is fair to look at that right now and say, nope, we probably didn't execute on that as much as we needed to? There is a window coming up in 2 months. We've got a run of games after Chelsea that looks very manageable. It is back on the club to go solve the problem in January that we didn't solve in the summer. Do you think that that is a reasonable framing of our current situation?
Well, there's a lot in there. Clearly, Yep. Clearly, Arteta made some choices in the summer, and he prioritized the left back, and he prioritized a left 8 profile. Mikel Merino is far more than a duel winner. That is something he does when we don't have the ball. He's really good at it. But you don't win duels on your own. If you think you go around a pitch making tackles and that's why you win duels as a system. In a system that's functioning, you're going to do really well. With 5 across the midfield and it's Newcastle and we're not feeling it, and it's not like you're kind of isolated tackling 2-3 players who are pinging it around you. You're not going to win your duels in that situation. So let's not judge his duel average based on a game in which we weren't getting it going. He should be, this is my projection for him, really good at triangles on the left-hand side and getting Martinelli going. That didn't happen in this game. Our triangles on the right-hand side, that horseshoe thing is partly the fact that we didn't have Ben White on the pitch. We didn't have Martin Odegaard and Saka over on that right-hand side, doing the swirl, putting it in the mixer, moving the ball around between the three of them, stirring the pot so that the other side start to open. We haven't had a functional left side for quite some time now, and I think there's no way that Arteta doesn't think Marino's a super intelligent midfielder who's going to do the pass, make the move that opens up the triangle and starts that one to turn the players around. But we didn't see any of it in this game. I couldn't tell you why, but I would have anticipated we'd be getting more out of that. We should have got more out of that with Timber, Trossard, Martinelli, and Merino on that side of the pitch. That to me is a big fail, that it didn't work, that it didn't produce anything, that Martinelli was left 1v1 versus 1 and 2 defenders too regularly. That's not his strength. I'm with Clive. I would have looked at Gabriel Jesus from that side. Now, maybe he's just in a funk and his head's not, but like a fit and firing Gabriel Jesus from that left-hand side, with his trickery, his ability to beat a man, would have done very nicely on a day when the wingers were struggling and basically having to do it on their own. And I have some concern that we haven't got Jesus mentally where he needs to be. Maybe it's all him. Maybe it's partly how he's been handled. But like most of all, I see this game as how do I judge you're going to get games like that, especially at St. James's Park. So you need this 3-game rolling average. The game before it was Liverpool. I think in many ways we were buoyed by the performance. I would have been buoyed. You were buoyed. This game's low. Depends what happens next, right? If Chelsea goes well, we're gonna start to see this as a fail, but not an augur for the way our season's going. But if Chelsea goes poorly, we're going to think this is bad, and we're really not where we need to be, and we've made even bigger mistakes than we thought. So, give me 3 games in a row. I hate judging a game on its own, and it's not entirely on its own. We've struggled with performances, and these players look tired. They look like they're struggling without our football, in the kind of football they want to play. They talked about it after the game, the players. This was not the game they wanted to play. Unfortunately, when you're not at the levels, that Newcastle setup will make us look very, very ordinary. They got the first goal. They looked like they had more danger than we had when they got a move going. I really don't think we were unlucky in this game. I haven't heard anybody feeling that. They were just better on the day. Their plan was better than ours. You might say we got out coached in terms of how we set up, how we played it.
Yeah, I agree. Look, ultimately, I've seen different XGs for this, but it's around 1 for Arsenal to 0.5 or 0.7, 0.8 for Newcastle, something like that. It's another one of these marginal games. Newcastle weren't great, but they got their goal. And they set out their stall, find a way to break down our mid-block. It was a 4-5-1 that became a 5-4-1 if we progressed the ball at all. And I just think it was very, very clear we were just going to go out wide into double teams, and we didn't have answers. We're going to have to find answers because our set pieces usually create threat. I don't think our set piece delivery was great. Candidly, I think Declan Rice put in a few corners that went too deep, weren't great. Our
Set
press,
pieces sucked. Yep.
yeah, it was bad set pieces. Our press was bad. It was our lowest dual winning percentage of the season. Mikel admitted the players physically were not at the level. We need a Dubai right now. We look like a team that needs its Dubai break at the moment. We have an international break coming up, and maybe we get Odegaard back, and maybe we come back from that and we look different. We do have Chelsea and Inter between now and then that we have to manage. So, Clive, I'll ask you the hard question as we start to wrap here, which is simply, there are people, and I don't mean hysterical people. I mean people that, I interact with and I think are quite intelligent, that are looking at the data and saying the league season now is becoming a bit of a long shot. I don't feel that way, and I'll explain why in a moment. But how are you thinking about where this leaves the league campaign in a season where I think we sort of made that leap? Oh, we're going from 89, we'll go to 92 or 93, we'll win the title. It'll be great. The season after that, we'll go to 102 and we'll break records. And the season after that, we'll be promoted to greatest team in the history of the universe. Like this linear progression to stardom. It's a bit of a blow versus expectations where we sit right now. So how are you thinking about the league campaign?
Yeah, to be honest, I've not thought too much about the overall season, because when you're playing like this, how can you think about the season? You got to think about getting your next performance levels right, and we're just not at the right level at the moment. So for me, I'm thinking about Inter Milan and Chelsea. Chelsea will make 11 changes for any midweek game they have, as they did last week, and they'll be fit and ready and fresh for us on Sunday, right? So we got to go to Milan, and we're going to have to pick a team, right? So so we got disadvantaged there. But what I will say is, I don't think this is terminal. I do think we can get back into the top end of the table. As for the league, I'm not so sure, right? I'm just not so sure at this moment in time. I'm less confident today than I was 4 weeks ago, when I was watching fullbacks punch in and us find different ways to play about Odegaard, and we're scoring. I'm thinking, this is great. How we've managed to find this. The Bournemouth game was a problem for me. I got one other thing to say, Elliot. I don't know how to articulate this, but the Man City game, for me, although I was absolutely fine with the result, what we discovered during that game was that we can really defend. We can really defend. Although they scored late, we discovered something about ourselves. And I wonder if we just got a little bit too much defensive DNA in our thought process at the moment, and we're not focusing around attack enough, And this is a collective thing, because we know we can do it. But you know what? We're not doing it. We concede in the odd one. And then when we have to switch to attack, I don't think we're doing it in a collective way. And we're relying on not enough players in form, on physical health and fitness to do it. And so we have, apart from Odegaard, all our attackers are there, mate. They're all there. And we're not doing it. And so that tells me something's not quite right there. We're a bit flat. We're out of form. Choices are being made. I think there's a few sulkers out there, if I'm honest with you. I think there's a few sulkers that want to play. Well, when you get a chance to play. I'm not seeing that aggressive intent to really attack. And the moment that stood out to me at the weekend was Declan Rice's run, when he took it on himself to just go. And then it almost opened up a sort of a window. Okay, that's what we do. We've just forgotten. Sometimes you forget who you are, because you get into this mode of defending and you forget who you are in the other way until something happens and then you're reminded. We had a 0 at Bournemouth and we had a 0 at Newcastle. We need to score. Let's just do that first, shall we? Let's just score, and then let's get the performance right. Then the points will come, and then we can have that where we are in the league discussion when we start to do those basics, and we're not doing the basics at the moment.
Yeah. 5 scoreless games last season in the league, 2 already this season. Granted, 1 was with 10 men and without Bukayo Saka. So I think you can kind of cross that one off a bit. This was a bad day at the office. I think it's the worst we've looked all season. And frankly, I don't think we've looked bad this season. I said that somewhere on social media, and people are like, you don't think we've looked bad this season? What's the game we played with 11 men that we looked bad? I don't think we looked great at the start of the Bournemouth game at 30 minutes. How do you judge? What was another game we didn't play well in? We played great against Liverpool until we had to put a back line out there that will never, ever play together as long as we watch Arsenal again. I think we looked great against City, then down to 10 men. I think we won at Villa. We won at Spurs. Yes, Southampton and Leicester got lucky goals, but we battered them into submission and won those games, deservedly. The goals need to be there, though. You can't have this many scoreless games in the league and win a title. I'll say this as a final thought on winning the title. We have a run coming up after Chelsea that looks a lot like the run Liverpool have just had to build their lead at the top. Liverpool, before Chelsea and us, had a very soft schedule. And that soft set of fixtures allowed them to build a little bit of a platform to say, this is a good season for us. Build that confidence. We're going to have to take a lot of points from the games after the interlull up until we play City February 1st, because that is a run of games where we've got a lot of winnable fixtures. I won't list them off to you. You can go look. It's a good run. That run determines what we're going to do. By the start of February, when City leave the Emirates, we're going to know if this is a title potential season or maybe something else that we hadn't considered. But we're going to know at that point for sure. So we got to get in a points accumulation mode after the interlull. And it's going to have to include putting our best players out there. Ben White has to play and Martin Odegaard has to play. We have to find goal scoring from people other than Bukayo Saka, right? We've got to start getting Kai Havertz into the box instead of out on the touchline. There's some things that have to change. And I'm sure Mikel knows all of this and will work on it. But you know what? We can't wait till after Chelsea. We've got to go to Stamford Bridge and do something. We've got to go to Inter and do something. It's another tough week in a season that feels like every week has been a tough week. The easy weeks that were supposed to be easy, we got sent down to 10 men. The tough weeks have been made even tougher with injuries and 10 men. It really does feel like we need some serenity. We have not had any serenity since this season starts. We've been firefighting the whole season. So, of course, the players look a little down. They look a little jaded. The fan base feels a little jaded. We've been firefighting nonstop. So I think we're going to have to draw a line under things after Chelsea, and hopefully that's a win, and come back from the international break full power with fixtures ahead of us that we can rack up points and start making the season feel a little bit more like we thought it would. That's just what's going to have to happen. And I still think it can happen. And I do think that we probably want to draw big sweeping conclusions right now, but I would suggest that we just pause on that long enough to see what an Arsenal with Odegaard back and some fixtures we can manage looks like. Do we still look like last season's Arsenal, or is something short of where it needs to be? I think that run I mentioned is going to determine that. We have Inter on Wednesday, so we'll try to do something for you tomorrow ahead of that. We'll certainly have an instant reaction after the Inter game. If you want to connect to more of the rage and fury of the Newcastle loss, that's always there on the instant reaction. You can soak all of it out. Hopefully this is more sensible analysis, raising some of the questions that I think are starting to percolate, but also not leaning too much into conclusions yet. Be a little early to do that. Let's leave it there. Paul's on Twitter. Pause my pants. Thanks, pause.
Woohoo!
Clive's on Twitter. Clive PFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, like I said, we'll try to get you something on Inter tomorrow. But doing a full Inter preview right now seems a little silly. We're going to put a team out and we'll see how it goes. It's just right now it's one big blow after the next. So hopefully things turn around. We're all in it together though. And thanks for hanging in there and being part of it. We'll definitely have something, I think, exciting happening in the near future. So we'll talk about that more as the time comes. In the meantime, hang in there. Another big game midweek. We love you. And we will talk to you after Arsenal 10, Inter 0.